In this video, we're going to talk about the macro view of marketing. If you remember from the last video, remember macro means big picture. Whenever we're thinking about the macro marketing, macro view of marketing, we are looking at the whole marketing system and how it all works together, how the whole agricultural marketing system all basically fits together. So this is the performance of all business activities involved in the forward flow of goods and services from the producer to the consumer. It's looking at all of the business activities together, looking at the whole big picture of the whole ordeal. So then we look at the marketing channel. Typically, whenever we think about the macro view of marketing, we look at the marketing channel. Now, this is the forward flow of goods and services from the producer to the consumer. So the marketing channel then are all the firms that move the commodity from the producer to the consumer. It's often thought of as from the farm gate to the consumer. So from the farmer to basically the food on their plate. But whenever we look at this marketing channel, we include one more. We include the input suppliers as well. So if we look at this marketing channel, we have the input suppliers. Those are like the John Deeres of the world. Those are those agricultural companies that provide to the farmers. So we have like John Deere, Monsanto, those type of individuals. These could also be insurance agents and folks that insure and take on that risk-bearing aspect of agriculture. Then we have the production segment. The production segment, those are your farmers. Those are the people that are involved in the biological process of that agricultural good or service. We have the assembly. Those are usually like your gins and your mills. Whenever, say, a farmer harvests their crop, they might take it to a gin, they might take it to a mill. That mill is the assembly step. That's where they are combining all of these commodities together. If you're a livestock person, you might think of this as the auction barn, because they're assembling all of these individual ranches, cattle together in one common place. So the assembly is mainly bringing them all together. Then we have the processors. And the processors are those that take that raw good and begin to actually turn it into a usable food source or a usable good. So these are the people that are going to be taking, say, for example, wheat, turning wheat into flour and then flour into bread. Those are those processors. Then you have the wholesalers. Wholesalers would be those that acquire large amounts of these processed goods and turn around and sell them to individual retailers. So those wholesalers are basically just creating large bulk amounts and selling it to the retail stores. Then those retail stores sell to the individual consumers. So as we move this way on this particular chart, as we move from left to right, we see that the product and quality information goes this way. So the products basically go from the production, from the input suppliers to the producers, to the assemblers, to the processors, to the wholesalers, to the retailers, and then to the consumers. Products flow left to right, as well as quality information. As these products are going down the line, you have the farmers and the ranchers and the marketers and the wholesalers and the retailers basically promoting that product all the way down the line. So quality information flows from the producer to the consumer, because the producer and the assemblers and the processors know how good their product is. So they're trying to push that to the consumers. On the flip side, you have payments going back from right to left. As that farmer sells to the assembler, the farmer gets paid. As the assembler sells to the processor pays the assembler. As the processor delivers the products to the wholesaler pays the processor. So as you move from left to right, you have the goods going down the line. But as you move from right to left, you have payments going back to those actually producing the goods. Another thing that we see here is that consumer preference travels from right to left. Consumers, what the consumers want, will be passed from the consumer down to the processor, typically through means of payments. So as you looked at this, products and quality info flow left to right, whereas payment and consumer preference flow right to left. Now, as you look at these individual little squares, you'll notice something. That these squares are rather large on this side, and then they shrink down to the processors, and they gradually get smaller until you get to the processors, and then they begin to increase in size again. Well, that's done by design. What that means is that the amount of producers are typically larger than the amount of assemblers. The amount of assemblers are going to be larger than processors. But the amount of processors are typically smaller than wholesalers. There's less wholesalers than retailers, and there's less retailers than consumers. So think about it this way. You might have about 2 million farmers in the United States. I think according to the last USDA figure, it was about 2 million farmers, a little over 2 million. How many cotton gins or how many packing plants are, sorry, not packing plants, but how many auction barns, how many cotton gins, how many grain mills are there in the United States? There's a lot less than there are farmers, right? So there are less assemblers out there than there are actual producers. What about processors? So if we look at, say, just the livestock industry, how many ranchers are out there? And how about how many auction barns are out there? Well, there's less auction barns than there are ranchers. What about those that are in the feedlots? Are there more or less feedlots than there are auction barns? Well, there's less. Feedlots would be part of this processing aspect. If we want to think about in the packing plants, how many packing plants are there out there? Well, there's going to be a lot less than the amount of feedlots. But yet, how many wholesalers are out there? How many wholesale stores are buying meat from these processors? Well, there's going to be a lot more wholesalers out there than there are going to be packing plants. By the same token, there are a heck of a lot more retailers than there are wholesalers. And there are a whole lot more consumers than there are retail stores. So as you look at this graph, you'll see it shrink down until it gets to these processors and then begin to grow again. Well, that's indicating that there are more individuals the larger the squares are. There are more farmers and ranchers. There is less assemblers than there are ranchers, but more than the amount of processors, and so on and so forth. So this size, this scope right here, indicates more or less the rough numbers that are out there. Now, this is not drawn to size by any means, but it just shows that example. So this pretty much encompasses the marketing chain, or the marketing channel.